When the day of Pentecost arrived, they were all together in one place. They were gathered in one place. What happens when we gather, whether it's virtually or in person? What happens when we are together? The Spirit moves every single time. Every time we gather, we are connected to one another and to our God. Every time we gather in person or remotely, we are reminded that we are not alone. Every time we gather, we are strengthened for the journey. Every time we gather, we are reminded that we are followers of Jesus. So yes, this Pentecost story might have happened a long time ago, and as we hear this story, we might even have a bunch of questions. Did tongues of fire really dance? Did they really have the ability to understand languages they didn't speak? And what on earth does all of that mean? I don't know. You might, but I don't. But we do know that this is the moment where things really begin to change. We know that prior to this, the disciples had spent most of their time after Jesus' death and resurrection hiding. They were fearful. And we know that after this story, they begin to tell Jesus' story. So this Pentecost moment is one that propels them out into our world. Now, what we sometimes forget is that this was not the Spirit's first arrival. The Spirit, the same Spirit, was present at creation, we read in Genesis. The Spirit, the same Spirit, was the one that was with Mary when she was pregnant with Jesus. The Spirit, the same Spirit, is the one that Jesus promises will show up and bring peace to the disciples when the going gets tough. Time and again throughout our scriptures, the Spirit shows up. And moreover, that Spirit, the same Spirit, didn't stop showing up once the Bible was put together by all those big fancy people who decided that these books become our Bible. The Spirit, the same Spirit, keeps showing up. The Spirit showed up when church folks gathered the courage to begin to speak out against slavery. The Spirit, the same Spirit, showed up when women were given voice in pulpits like this one around the world. The Spirit showed up when we began to understand that other religions weren't wrong and that they were just different, and we can learn and grow together. The Spirit showed up when our 4 predecessor denominations became 2 denominations, and kept showing up when our United Church of Christ became 1, despite all the differences that could have kept us apart. The Spirit showed up when University City United Church was founded in 1964. And again, in 2011, when this church voted to become open and affirming of all persons. The Spirit shows up when we put together diaper bags for moms in need. The Spirit shows up when we fill backpacks for kids in need. The Spirit shows up when we fill our bins to overflowing with food for CCSA. The Spirit shows up when our Sunday school teachers gather our kids outside on the patio so that they can learn the stories of Jesus. The Spirit shows up when we call one another on the phone and connect with somebody else from the church that we haven't seen in a while. The Spirit shows up over and over and over again. And so today, as we prepare to gather at our table, we remember that the Spirit shows up. It might not happen, it might, don't get me wrong, it might, with divided tongues dancing on our heads. It might be a more subtle memory that pops into our heads of the first time we had communion. It might be a memory that you have of a meal that you shared with someone when a bond was formed. It might be a time when you gathered for communion at home, all by yourself, watching worship and remembering that you are not alone. It might be a still small stirring within you. That's the Spirit at work connecting us. So this Pentecost day, I invite you to either close your eyes or focus on the flickering candle or the beautiful glasswork or the flames on the banner, whatever focus you can have, and listen to these words. Imagine people from all around the world, from Australia and Scotland, Canada and the United States, countries in Africa, from India and Brazil, and from all the places in between, from places of hope and places of anger, places of plenty and places of hunger, people who are overwhelmed by emptiness, and people who are overwhelmed by abundance. People from yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Now imagining all these people gathered in one place, unsure, uncertain, captured by fear. We wait, wondering what it is we are waiting for. And in the midst of all time and space, God's Spirit bursts in once again, as it always does. And we are reminded that God, our Creator God, our loving and forgiving God, our God that never lets us go, is come to us once again. The risen Christ, who we sometimes fear has left us, is right here in our very midst, and we are overcome with joy. While others may laugh at us and make fun and tell us we are too full of fanciful ideas and not dealing with the real world, we know that the real world is God's place. and that reality is seeking to align ourselves with God. And we hear these words from the prophet Joel. God's Spirit is poured out, lavishly overflowing on all people. No matter who we are or where we have been, God's Spirit is poured out upon us. And we know, as sure as the sun rises and sets, that God's love is for all people. I invite you, God's beloved, to return to this space where we will gather at the table, be it this communion table or your tables at home or wherever you are worshiping today, ready and open to the Spirit at work.